Awesome. That was a perfect little ending there. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to all those who are attending our 2023 virtual convening of South Summit. This session, Southern Queer Sanctuary, explores queer sanctuary building in the South, especially now in a political climate where access to healthcare and safe spaces is being legislated away from us. Today's panelists are basically going to share about how they have built sanctuaries in the South through either their work or other means. And we have a couple folks today that are joining us. We have Maya Penn, we have Greko, please forgive me, Greko, your last name. I'm so embarrassed. Please, I'm gonna try it. The Sklavounos. Yeah, okay, go me. So Greko Sklavounos. Okay, I am up to be corrected. And Vaughn Trudeau, who's joining us, and this panel is going to be moderated by Farrington. So before we get into the session, let me tell you a little bit about our panelists. Farrington is a rising star in the world of film criticism with roots in the stunning United States Virgin Islands, and a home base in the glamorous Atlanta, Georgia. Farrington is the sought-after programming and operations specialist with a passion for advocating for inclusion, social justice, and underrepresented communities in media and the creative arts. With a tri-coastal reach, Farrington's programming have been featured at a renowned festival such as Frameline, Oxford, Atlanta Film Festival, and more. He is a proud member of the Programmers of Color and Queer Programmers United Circle, and he can be found cuddling with his kitten, Ruffles, whenever he has free time. Yay, Ruffles, Ruffles here. Our next panelist, that was our moderator. Our next panelist, Greko Sklavounos, is an American artist and filmmaker of Greek and Mexican descent. He received a BFA in film from Florida State University in 2007 and an MFA from the School of Arts Institute in Chicago in 2016. Sklavounos' films have been screened internationally at festivals, including Athens International Film Fest, New Orleans International Film Fest, and Arbor and Miami Film Festival. Greko was a 2022 Flaherty Film Seminar Fellow and a 2022 Third Horizon Forward Fellow, and is currently a cinematic arts resident at Oolite Arts in Miami, where he's developing his first feature film. Vaughn Trudeau, our next panelist, is a New Orleans-based filmmaker and educator. Since beginning his career, Vaughn has produced films and television shows on both coasts with companies ranging from Viacom, MTV, to Warner Brothers, CBS, NBC, Vimeo, and most recently, Live Nation. He has always divided his time between working in the field with teaching the craft to a new generation of creative minds from high school through college and beyond in master's programs. Vaughn uses any and all of his time between mainstream entertainment projects to write, produce, direct, and edit his own films. And finally, last but not least, Maya is a self-taught artist from Philadelphia, based in New Orleans. She works across various mediums, including film, special effects, performance art, puppetry, theater, music, and creative writing. So all of these panelists are just amazing and impressive.
And thank you so much for the New Orleans Film Society for giving us the space to have this conversation. Like you said, it is some delicate times now, especially being here in the South and making art and creating as we look at the times. But I'm really amped up about this conversation about sanctity and what I think each of these filmmakers have found and built on and collaborated and brought to those sanctities and those safe spaces. Like Zuri said, I'm Farrington, so I'm representing Out on Film. If you can check out this amazing little background I have here, which is a LGBTQ plus film festival in Atlanta, Georgia. Out on Film is Oscar qualifying in its shorts. We feature its 11-day slate with over 150 films, which is a lot. It would be 12 days if Jim Farmer had something to say about that. And we provide just a robust program and a robust slate of films each year. And we just recently were awarded USA Today's #1 film festival in the country, in case you didn't know that, but that's something that we are just kind of in elation to just announce. And that as well, just in the conversation, it's great that the organization like Out on Film has the ability to be seen and heard and present as we are doing some amazing things and always giving back. The best part about being in that film industry is speaking with filmmakers. So I have an abundance of questions I'm just going to be throwing to filmmakers, letting them kind of mix and mingle how they feel. But I wanted to go ahead and just kind of pass it off and just maybe start each person how they tie to how they got their journey to the South. Like for me, I was born and raised in the Virgin Islands, so the Atlanta kind of became a second home for me, being Black and queer, and not having those outlets. But yeah, I just have been it's been a life save and a saving grace for me to be able to express myself there. And yeah, with that, Maya, if you wanted to take on the next phase.
Yeah, hey everybody. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Philadelphia. I came to New Orleans as a teenager, kind of accidentally. My roots are, both my parents are immigrants from South America, and many of my family members in previous generations have not made it to the States and have not raised families in the States. And so I think I've always had a relationship to Philadelphia that was uncertain and not super grounded, outside of like being born there and living there. And my immediate family is also all over the world. So I found a lot of the things that we're going to talk about and like sanctuary and community here in the South, like pretty exclusively. And it's where I've continued to build that.
Greko, if you want to take on the baton next.
Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm Greko. I am an artist and filmmaker from Miami, Florida, which sits in a really interesting space and place in the South. I think it exists in this interesting intersection between the global North and the global South. There's a very large Latin American immigrant population here. And my family themselves came from Mexico. My grandmother was born in Cuba. My dad is from Greece. So, you know, it's sort of like a melting pot of experiences and culture. Like most people born and raised here, I think I have a complicated relationship with Miami. I don't know if everyone has seen that video of, oh, you're from Florida. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm from Miami-Dade. So it's kind of like its own island. And as an artist and filmmaker, I felt it, you know, really important to stay here and really help shape its, you know, artistic voice in film and media. And I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you to that. And then Vaughn, I'm going to pass that right along.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I can't see anyone except for those who are speaking, Maya and Greko, Farrington and Zuri. I do see some names out there that I'm excited to see who are here, though, and to meet all these new names. I've been based in New Orleans for the last 6 years. I just hit my 6-year anniversary. It feels like yesterday. I've lived between Los Angeles and New York for most of my career before that. I felt for a long time like I wasn't really able to have a career in media unless I lived in one of those big cities. And it just every single year when it would come up time to renew a new lease, you know, to live in a small bedroom of like a 3 or 4 bedroom arrangement in those big cities, I would sort of psych myself up to go make a big move, to go be where I wanted to be in New Orleans, a city that I just weirdly and mysteriously loved and wanted to be in. Finally, I don't know, back in 2017, that was just the year where something snapped. I think it had something to do with the election that went down that year, and I was just like, I have nothing to lose anymore. Let's go. It was really scary for me to come to a much smaller city, still a big city. But I mean, a smaller city in the sense of what I understood its media industry to be like. And when I landed here, I knew not a single soul except for a few like friends of friends of friends, who all in various ways took me under their wing, showed me around, introduced me to an awesome organization here called Novak, who helped me meet so many people so quickly. And now I consider myself a New Orleans-based filmmaker, and I'm extremely proud of it. It's like my favorite thing to say about myself, and it's true.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. I think there's just a healthy blend here of the South. I think what we're all kind of seeing is that films are being made and produced and happening right here in your backyard. I think, Vaughn, your story specifically, just I think there's like kind of the stigma against like, oh yeah, you got to go to New York or you got to go to Hollywood to like enjoy and be engaged in that film aspect. Can you talk just, I mean, I've obviously talked about it now, but just getting into what the scene is looking like, how much content and just work is out there as far as being a filmmaker and pursuing that field.
And are you asking me about that in New Orleans specifically?
Yeah, specifically. I know it's like the last 6 years, he's mentioned, but I know you're kind of all over the place as well. But just a scope of what the city is looking like in Atlanta. I mean, there's like just you can't turn around without something in your face. And I know that that's obviously not just Atlanta and just to the South. I know there's various pockets, but I just wanted to see what that might be entailing, looking like at current climate.
Yeah, I think the current climate still applies to what my sort of fear of the understanding all was, which is that New York City and even more so Los Angeles are the meccas for careers in the entertainment industry, in all the various branches of the entertainment industry. I do think that what we're seeing is we're starting to see it spread into smaller big cities, we'll call them, where there is actually a way to hold a career there, to maintain a career there. I would say the opportunities, relatively speaking, in those smaller cities are considerably smaller, probably at least in like entry-level opportunities than they are in the major cities where there's a lot more productions going on at once, therefore more scalable opportunities. I do think that's changing year to year. I think something I still see and I don't love is that there's a lot of like trade and tech crew member jobs that are available locally in the big cities, but not central creative, producerial development, big thinking groups that have really had the chance yet to form in major ways, like the studio systems and the streaming systems as we know them today in the smaller cities. So I do think that there are opportunities. I think you can do anything you put your mind to if you really work your butt off. And I encourage everyone to be self-starters. But I would say that New York and LA still have a very strong advantage for opportunities, especially from like early stages onward. And I would love very much to be any small or big part I can hold in changing that.
No, that's awesome. And then Maya, I know you have played another dynamic as well, same region. What is that experience like for you on your end and everything that you're engaged in?
Yeah, it's been mixed. It's been tough, but I think that sort of like this stigma that you're talking about of needing to outsource like work from big cities or needing to go to, I do have friends who are from here who are like, I have to drive to Chicago this many months out of the year to paint murals because the opportunities are not the same or the money's not there, whatever the case might be. But what I think is really cool is the conversation that's happening around like how to support that not happening and like what does it look like to create opportunities for each other, and like really those are the conversations I'm having every day with people in my life is like, what is it, how like how do you do it? Okay, where does the money come from? Like how do we make ourselves known as these people who are here as creatives, not just as whatever tech jobs. And I'm like the co-director of this collective that has been around for a couple of years, but we've just leased a physical space and we're starting to really move in that direction. It's called Studio La La La. And that is our intention that we're moving with completely, is how do we provide each other with the skills and the resources that we need so that we can say yes to those jobs, whether they're coming here or they're like from here, you know, and equipping ourselves with like all the things that we need to really be that alternative to leaving, and also be the thing that people find when they're ready to take on work. People who are like, you know, learning those skills here and then looking out to New York and LA, and hoping that they can find that in New Orleans instead. So that's what we're doing.
No, that's amazing. And then Greko, I know you do an assortment of stuff, and you do some commercial work as well on the side. Is there anything you want to add just about the climate and your spaces, and how it's like in Miami and Florida?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think Miami, like other entertainment hubs, does have its share of commercial work. I think the circle is much smaller. The opportunities are a little bit more scant. I think it's a matter of, if you have a technical ability, whether it's camera operating or editing, just making yourself known for that and kind of pursuing that commercially. But, you know, there's this whole idea of like having a dual path of the practice and then what pays the bills. And then it's finding a way to bridge that gap. And it's a thing I contend with all the time. I think it's a matter of, you know, having this like dual identity for a while, which can be complicated. I also think it involves being a little bit more imaginative of where those opportunities can be. And if you have the means to like actually travel to other places that you feel can give you opportunities, you know, it's all about networking, I think. And, you know, it's tough. It's like, we're not in LA and New York anymore in general. So it's like, you just got to put yourself out there, I think, and not be afraid.
No, thank you so much. Another question I have, and I kind of want to throw it to Zuri maybe, and just the group, just is like, what does it mean to be Southern queer? How does your identity incorporate into your identity in the South and as a filmmaker? I think Greko, even you as well, I know, like you mentioned, just kind of the imagery and the imagination that comes into putting into work. What might yeah, like what are your views as far as just your identity in the South?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think queerness is really about disruption. You know, it's about disrupting traditional modes of making, of the way we move through the world. So, you know, being a Southern queer is like, it's interesting because it's about sort of growing up and understanding that the way you perceive and move through the world is different. And like sort of like that power of feeling othered, I think can be really generative and shouldn't be taken for granted, right? And so I think, you know, the South, it's complicated, right? It's like the people who stay here, kind of like I said before, have like a contention with it. I feel like we're dealing with a lot of political headwinds right now. I feel like, you know, I've seen the wind change multiple times. And I feel like now specifically, the political is becoming more social. So there used to be more of a gap there, where politics was kind of like an exchange of economy. And now I feel like it's becoming like the culture wars, you know, is really like trickling down. So there's like a lot more, there's like an acute sense of like, I don't want to say terror, but there's definitely concern, right? So I think, you know, being a Southern queer filmmaker and artist means finding ways to sort of use that as an opportunity. I feel like queer artists do their best work when they're facing these conditions. You know, I really think of James Baldwin's essay on the creative process, and, you know, moments when society is facing dark moments, I think it's the role of the artist to sort of reflect that back onto them and to understand that nothing is really stable in society. And I think that's just part of our job living here, you know? So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Greko. And then Mayo, I do want to tag you in there as well. Just again, reflecting on just Southern queerness and yourself.
Yeah, my relationship, I think, is to being a queer in the South is different to people who are Southern and are from here. But I think that, like, for me, it's really aligned in all of the things that we're talking about as far as like sanctuary, or the creation of spaces that are there to welcome people or to greet people when they arrive, whether they're coming from New Orleans or from elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, to also just to echo all the things that Greko said, and like, I think the legacy of the South as far as organizing and resistance and Black cooperative economics and mutual aid and all of these things, like the creation of these kinds of, like we were referring to the other day as islands, you know, New Orleans is like this island. Greko, you're like, Miami's not Florida, it's Miami. Like these kinds of things are echoed, I think, in a lot of smaller groups of people, you know, whether it's like queerness or some other identity. So I think that for me, my relationship to it has been like in my own life has been seeking sanctuary in that way, or understanding like who I'm claimed by. Like, I think that is both in my life and my family of immigrants and myself as a queer person, the idea of like being claimed by people is what sanctuary means to me. It's like seeing people that I'm reflected in and knowing that I'm supposed to be there. And for me, this is where that happened for me, both as a queer person, but also as an artist and as a person with like a complicated story. I mean, all of these elements for me like landed here in these groups of people who are both from here and not from here, but have like who have just been listening and building off of this legacy that exists here that has laid the foundation for these islands to exist and to thrive, even in the face of all of those ebbs and flows and changes that are constantly among us.
Maya, thank you so much for that. And then Vaughn as well, just again, focusing on your Southern queer identity. What does that mean to you?
It's exciting to even call it a Southern queer identity, because I'm still, even after 6 years, getting used to the idea of being a Southerner at all. And it's something I feel extremely proud of. I do think living in New Orleans is a strange, it's a strange identity of being a Southerner, because Maya was using the word island, and like I think that's exactly how I think of it here in this city, is like it's an island, and queer people are just most of the time, I think, really drawn to the allure of this city and of this place. There's something very spooky and strange. There's something very queer about it, even if you just go back into like the history books approach to the city, it was a city that was like thriving, but nobody really wanted it when this was being juggled between France and Spanish territories. I think that the city just is queer down to its soil, and I have felt that from like the very first moment I ever stepped foot in it and fell in love with it. I would visit it every time I had time off, usually coming down from Brooklyn, where I lived. And I found it was just like a way, way, way edgier, more interesting, hotter version of Brooklyn. And I loved that. Myself as a queer Southerner, I think I'm feeling just a ton of responsibility, at least in the narrative or creative side of my life, to really try and understand in my own way what makes this city so queer, and understand better than the ways I can fit into it and the ways I can be a good community member of the queer scene here. I look around and it is an extremely liberal city. It's so strange when you just hear Louisiana laws passing, and I'm sure Greko relates to this in Miami. You hear like the headlines of like this law is changing and that law is changing, and just looking around here, it just doesn't fit, and it's very off-putting, and it doesn't really make any sense with my surroundings. But literally, like just going into the suburbs of New Orleans, that change goes into effect, and I don't know, it really just kind of emboldens me to be more of a fighter in the stories that I want to tell, and the stories that I am actively and constantly telling. It just puts more of like a flame under that creative pot that I'm always boiling, and it burns it harder. So yeah, I'm extremely proud to be a Southern queer, as I think we're calling ourselves.
One of us. Thank you so much. One of us. Just don't embrace it, okay? Embrace it. And then Zuri, I'm going to throw that same to you, and let you take a spin at the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farrington. Yeah, my Southern queerness is really interesting because I, like Greko, grew up in Miami, and Miami is like so queer, but it's like this idea of being visible but silent, right? It's very much, although there's a lot of like queer cultures there and a lot of celebration and parades and parties that celebrate just being just gaudy and out there and expressive, like Goombay Fest, Calle Ocho. These are like really huge things that happen in Miami where all the queers are coming out, right? But it was always really interesting because even growing up in high school, like my teachers were gay, the principal was gay, right? But we never really spoke about it. And like as a teenager, we would like sneak to like gay bars and like, oh, that's Mr. So-and-so, right? And then we'll see each other tomorrow and be like, I see you, right? But so that was really my experience in Florida, was this idea of being visible but silent, which is appropriate for what's going on there now, which is the Don't Say Gay bill, right? But what they didn't put in that bill was be gay, just don't say you're gay, right? Because I feel like in Florida, that's what it is. Like there's a thriving queer culture that is self-sustainable, and in like not only the underbelly, but like prominent culture as well. But they just don't speak about it. It's very much like the church, right? Like you have the queers in the choir, but don't talk about it. So that's my experience as a teen or growing up or coming into my queerness. But moving to New Orleans, it was visible and loud, right? It was visible, like we're here, and even like the straight people are queer, right? Like everyone. I think it's not even just, I think in New Orleans, I've learned that queerness is not about a sexuality or preference or gender. Queerness is an expression that will not be defined, right? That refuses to be defined, that refuses to have order. And there's nowhere that comes out than in Mardi Gras, right? And even like the subsequent Super Sundays that happen, people showing up as they are and everyone coming together for that, right? For the purpose of celebration. So yeah, it's just really interesting how my relationship to being queer or Southern queer is kind of twofold. Like it's the first, you're visible, but don't say nothing, right? And then now we're visible, we're out here, we're partying, we got glitter on us that's going to last for like 10 years, right? But it's like, it's just interesting of having that, two sides of the coin. And also like with the South affecting my identity and my queerness, it's also affected like my creative process, right? I was speaking earlier in one of the panels about experimental film and how like my Southness is very slow. Everything that I do is very intentional, is very like almost like overthinking. And, just if I were to be in New York or Chicago or LA, I'm so susceptible to like just the energies around me. This idea of like getting things done fast, and it doesn't matter what it looks like, just get it done, get it out. Like we got to make this money. I feel like, because of my growing up in the South and how I grow up, like that doesn't gel with me. Like I'm on a timeline that's not mine, right? It's spiritual, it's ancestral. And that I take into my creative process, in my relationships even, just really being slow, observant, and kind of having that slow burn realization that shows itself with patience, right? Without being rushed. Basically the teacher that patience is, and that's come from my grandmother, my mother, and just this Southern culture in general, the storytelling. So folks are telling you story, you're like, all right, tell me the end, what's happening? Like, no, I gotta tell you like the story, like let it unfold, chill out, right? So yeah, it's just really interesting how just the South has not only influenced me as a human being and what I consider to be queer, but how I approach my work and how I express myself. And with that, I'm just really interested to, for each of the panelists, like, we talked about how, queerness affected us and how we identify, how I know, your studio La 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 is very much a roll your sleeves up, DIY, queer-centered, Black queer-centered production company. Vaughn, you are always like, you have your grind work, which again, I met you Live Nation, amazing producer, but you also have like your side work that you just get done regardless. And Vaughn, the same way, when you're just saying like, we just reach for what we have available to us, and we kind of bend that tool to our expressions, right? So all of that is this creative process. Like, I'm wondering if the South had anything to do with how you approach your work. Like, how does it inform and influence how you show up in the film space and how you, creatively?
Is that for me?
Yeah, anyone that can jump in. Yeah, popcorn, let's do this.
Oh. That like sort of dark, edgy, like spookiness that I speak about in New Orleans, I just think that's like the epitome of the kinds of stories that I have always loved from my earliest stages. I just remember reading like, haunted house books. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was like my favorite when I was a kid. I don't know, there's something so wondrous about just the dark side of the city, and this city has a darkness to it just through and through like that shines in its own way through all the celebratory atmospheres we live in here. I think that I can't get enough of that. I think I don't think you can understand a true queer experience without going into the darkness. So I think that in telling the stories here that are in the South, there's no complete queer story without a real journey into that darkness. And I'm not talking about just like your quintessential, like we all face emotional violence or physical violence or just, any version of violence that comes to us in our queer upbringings. But I'm talking about when we do escape that and we do feel like we get to be ourselves, we still carry a darkness with us, I think, as queer people. And it's a superpower, or it can be a superpower if you're able to harness it, and it can be your destruction if you're not. And I think that this city, it's just like the two things here. I watch it with me and I watch it with other people who live in the city. They just, your darkness and your creativity like become one very quickly, and that deeply impacts the stories I tell. I love that I don't know. I love that I can constantly explore that just in my like any sort of local project that I get the honor of working on.
Mm-hmm. And if we will, before everyone else answers, I would really love to kind of give folks a visual example of your work and what you're talking about. So maybe we can kind of dive into your clip, Vaughn, and then we can move on with the, answering the questions and getting to other people's work. So let's cue up Vaughn's clip.
I really do think places take on the spirit of people that put a lot into it. And I just think they really put everything they had into it. They really cared about the people, they cared about the community. And the AIDS crisis was going on for, the whole time they owned the bar. So there's a lot of spirits here. But they were all cultivated by George and Jamie.
Awesome. So Vaughn, tell us a little bit about that clip and give us some context with that clip.
Sure. That's a clip from a film that I made this past year called Oral History, about New Orleans' last remaining gay leather bar that's alive and thriving over in Marigny. It's one of my favorite bars in the city. I've just always found it to be so strange that it's this place filled with kind of like gruff, I don't know, very like large framed, almost biker-esque, a lot of men there. And yet I was always just so curious why everyone was still like so friendly there. And I explored it. in helping them just try to think of some ways to celebrate their 40th anniversary. And in doing so, I found out that the bar started 40 years ago as a love story between two bartenders from other bars, and they came together and they created this bar in 1983, right as the AIDS epidemic was really starting to begin in New Orleans, and how ever since then, the bar always just was a reaction to the community needs here, especially for the people being most affected by that crisis. And so what you're seeing there is a clip of one of Kathleen Conlon, who was really close friends with those original owners, talking about them and how they put themselves into that bar to create in its own way a sanctuary for the people who needed it at the time.
Yeah, we got a chance to screen this with one of my films at the last New Orleans Film Festival, and just such a beautiful, amazing story. I mean, just this film about the sanctuary spaces that club spaces are, right? A lot of folks don't consider that to be sanctuary, but for a lot of folks, a lot of queer folks especially, the bar, the club scene is very much a place of finding self and finding queerness. So thank you so much for just doing that film. I hope folks can check out the whole thing. Maya, so yeah, the question that I asked was basically, how does the South influence your creative process? And then we can get into your sizzle reel so that we can get a better idea about your creativity. I got you. You're not left out.
Yeah, well, it's hard. So it's hard for me to like separate like a creative process in the South from anywhere else, because this is where I learned a creative, like this is where my creative process came to be. But I think that just what we were talking about before, and just the South, and just all the people who kind of planted the seeds for these kinds of sanctuaries to exist, like this is what taught me, I think, everything that I know about art making and organizing and community, not on a technical logistical level, but like that slowness, Zuri, that you were talking about, this approach to collaboration and to community, and this blanket idea that like there's this potential to meet each other's needs, is what has informed my creative process completely. So I think, for example, like just in the work that we're trying to do with Studio La La La, it's really here to serve self-taught artists of color, queer self-taught artists in general. But the idea is really to be able to have the art making process look exactly how we would like it to. And that includes like not being the DP on a film, but being handed the camera because you have a vision for what a shot could look like, and understanding that the only reason like those things don't happen in traditional settings because of a certain speed and efficiency or classism, or like some, idea around the role you're there to serve is the only role that you can exist in. And in talking about like queerness as well, it's like I think the language of queer love and friendship and expression and transformation, like these things are not different from art making with queer people, because all of these things are felt in the way that we invite each other in and relate to each other's brains and bodies and processes. And so I think for me, like there's a lot of euphoria in my creative process with the people that I'm surrounded by. But something else too is like, I think it is also like inherently like a part of being an artist in the South to be crafty in the way that we survive and like outsource, these conversations we're having about like really wanting for people to be able to stay here and find their work here. Like the irony is I'm in San Francisco right now calling in because I'm installing a gallery show here. It's my first show, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And I would love to have that happen, not all the way over here. And Juicebox, who is with me in this process, who also runs Studio La 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 with me, we're having all these conversations about how exciting it is there's so many artists from the South who are a part of the show. So there's this other part of the experience of getting to bring them here, and how excited people are to like, we're going all the way to San Francisco. Our work is up in San Francisco, and everyone's asking us about New Orleans. Everyone's asking us like about what's happening here and how to support, you know, Studio La La or other people who are based here and making work here. So I think that's an extension too of like, that's what I've learned about the creative process here, as well as like how to bring it back home to people, and what it looks like to build that like kind of local network here that can feed each other constantly without having to leave. And that also looks like using the skills and the tools I've learned here from people who are from here to go and get that at the same time. So there's a lot of dynamics to it, but there's a lot of skill sharing and like euphoria and struggle and like love. And that is what has carried me here for sure.
Yeah. And I think like in our initial conversation, we were talking about how when you're saying like, you know, someone just puts a camera in your hand and you just got, if you have a vision, just go get the shot kind of thing. But yeah, it's very much the not no labels. I was just talking to a friend about, you know, and there's nuances between race and class and culture, but how like, you know, the queerness is very much like just an existence. It's not really like a label, right? And I think that you're talking about the same thing about being on set. It's like, you are not a DP, you just shoot a camera and you can, right? As opposed to someone who's stuck in that role and really rigid. And I think that's something that the South gives us, is space to move around and try on different identities and still be loved and accepted and feel safe in trying those new identities out. So yeah, let's take a look at your sizzle reel so that we can get a better idea about, you know, your work and, you know, how you create, so that we can, you know, see your Southernness show up in your work. Let's cue Maya's clip, please.
Bienvenido a Lengua Sagrada. Bienvenido de donde sea que hayas venido. And welcome from all that you thought impossible. Aquí nos alejamos de la sombra de la raíz podrida. We built this place for you to undo and make new. Construimos esos hogares para que los habites, for you to never hide again. Nuestra comunidad es nuestra fuerza vital. We feed each other to be fed. We work the land to own our work. Te damos la bienvenida, as do your ancestors, y a todos los que nacen por el amor que viertes en ese lugar. Bienvenidas, hermanas mías, a la lengua sagrada. We hope that if you find your home here, you keep it forever.
Wow, beautiful. So a little bit of a toot. Maya won South Pitch, the narrative grand prize last year for this very film. So we're really excited to see some images from it, and just really excited about, you know, the work that's coming from you. And I think like another thing that really stuck to me is like how you don't really have a title, right? You have like puppetry and artists and all these things that are ever present. And I think it just shows up in your work with like just the intention and the nuancing of some of these, like, I don't know, I don't say creatures, but like these beings that you just bring out into this world. I think it's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your reel and, you know, sharing the space. Studio La La La. which is, again, we're going to have a chance to talk more about that towards the end. But yeah, last but not least, Greko, question, I know it was a long time ago I asked that question, but wondering how, Miami or the South, which might be the same or different, I don't know, influences your work, especially your work in being imaginative and creative in your film. You do a lot of experimental work. So please let us know about that process, and then we can take a look at some of your work.
Sure. I mean, I think the South, or growing up in the South, it's about, the landscape, and moving from regional to being a little bit more specific to Miami. It's a city that's been built on a swamp that is relatively new. It's undergoing constant change. It sits in a really interesting geographical and topographical area. Where I grew up was on the west side, which is the part that's closer to a little more suburban. It's closer to the Everglades, and that's constantly being pushed further and further in development. And, in my own practice, I think about queer cinema or cinema crafted by queer artists. And I think about an experience of phenomenology or moving through the world that's been attuned by being othered. And I think about articulating, a certain way of perceiving, absorbing, of crafting a work that contains an expressiveness. It's like vibrating at a certain register. And I think it's important to think about the economy of your practice and sort of never put yourself in a position to compromise that, because I know it's been repeated, but that's kind of like the superpower. And I felt like the clip that you guys are going to play, I think it's from my first short film. And I felt it was really important for me to sort of, if queerness is the filter, it's sort of like, this is the way I feel these spaces and moving through these spaces. And maybe you can show it and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the other end.
So let's take a look at Greko's clip.
Cuando me siento muy mal, tengo este lugar. Siempre está vacío. Es solo yo observando el lugar. Y siempre está esta música de fondo. Es la misma música todo el tiempo.
Beautiful. Oh my God, the palm trees give me FOMO. Yeah, so Greko, give us some context about that clip that we just watched.
Sure, yeah, that's a clip from my short "In Beauty It Is Unfinished." It's a film that I made back in 2020 now, and I shot most of it within, I would say, a mile or 2 miles from where I grew up. It's a film about connection and isolation, and sort of how this dynamic shapes our lives as queer people. And I began to think of emotional memory and that being an important form of knowledge, and thinking of how it shapes the way we see the world. And I think as my first short, it just became important to me to sort of articulate that, like to create a space, to creative work, to sort of set a tone of saying, this is the way I see the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like when I was watching your film, I'm like, this is so Miami. It's so beautiful. And I realized I'm seeing that in a lot of films that we are sharing with Southern-based artists, like nature and sounds, like sound design feels like just so important, and landscape feels so important, as opposed to, let's say, an LA film or a New York film where you might hear traffic sounds or different kind of things. It's always like, it feels Southern when you see a film that's made in the South and that Southern sensibility. So thank you so much for that. So yeah, I'm sure I'm not gonna take up too much space. I'm sure Farrington has some different questions, and when Farrington's done, we're gonna kick it to the general public who has some pressing questions that we're gonna have some space to answer to. So go ahead, Farrington, take it away.
Thank you so much, Zuri. Those were some great questions, and Greko, that was just an amazing just imagery and sensory, and just like so much ways that you're engaging within your filmmaking that like really expands on like the queer imagination. What the other question I would have as far as the group and asking our amazing speakers today would just be about some just organizations and networks that I think some of you have tied into a lot. But I do want to just provide that space for anyone interested, trying to find sources, find resources, tap in. I don't know who to pass it off to first, but I'm going to probably give it to Vaughn. Vaughn, I feel like you've been quiet a little bit for a second here, and I know you also I know you're also an educator and do a lot as far as just like networking and being at that hub, an organizational hub, and being so transparent there. But yeah, so I guess the question back again would be, you know, what networks and organizations are amplifying Southern queer voices?
I can't stress it enough, but Novak really, I know just across the board in the New Orleans area is a must if you look for any sort of guidance, or you're just looking for peers, or you're looking to get involved in a way that you feel like you can give back, and any end of the spectrum. New Orleans Video Access Center is just a one-stop from the giving the education to receiving the education, or as hopefully everyone always is, doing both at once. I cannot shout them out enough. The New Orleans Film Society, every single event I've ever been to, ranging from any of the festivals they do, just to like one-on-one or one-off screenings, I just always see something anytime you all put an event on that I walk away feeling like my mind has grown, and I'm going real local here, but I would just say for anyone who doesn't live in New Orleans, your local queer spaces, your queer bars, your queer cabarets or burlesque spaces, performing centers that gear toward any sort of queer storytelling, those are major resources. Those are your community, those are your outlets. They're there to teach you, and they're there to be taught by you if you're a storyteller yourself. Just always lean really hard into and with those people.
Thank you so much. Oh no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say I second that. Like it's the queer spaces, the queer bars, like these other places that are, you know, salvation. So let me stop you. Go ahead.
Absolutely life-changing. Maya, I was going to pass it to you. I know as well, Studio Lala is a great resource that people need to be plugged into. But anything else that you might want to highlight?
Yeah, definitely. Studio Lala. Also, like we work with lots of other people and have like kind of partners in this work, and one of them is the Dream House, was run by Uhuru, and that is a space for Black, queer, and trans artists to do residencies, just to coexist, have workshops, hang out, with a center on Black disabled artists. And they recently crowdfunded actually to buy a house, and are doing a lot of really amazing work around this dynamic that we have like sort of talked about, just about the balance of like reparations and buying land here, and also like welcoming people who are in search of sanctuary from elsewhere. And they're just an amazing person and group of people to support. Also, Gallery of the Streets is this amazing group of Black artists and organizers and scholars and community members who are doing site-specific work, collaborating with whether it's like public space, like abandoned space or neighborhoods to create like visual representations of really specific site-based narratives. Novak, everyone loves Novak. Loud, yeah, these are just, but also to echo what Vaughn said, like for me, specific to like the queer sanctuaries, just like events, you know, and people who are hosting things that I can't even name because they're so special and rare and like sometimes happen once and never again, and are totally just about the energy in the room at that moment. So.
I'll absolutely love. And then Greko, I want to pass it off to you. I know you have an I just also want to give you the opportunity to talk. I know you have some residencies and some fellowships you're a part of, but just also same question for you, just like any organizations, networks that are, focused in amplifying queer Southern voices.
Sure. I mean, so yeah, I'm a cinematic arts resident at Oolite Arts in Miami, and they're an arts organization that they do a good job at elevating and supporting all types of marginalized folks, including queer people. And I think for the cinematic arts portion, you do have to be a Miami-Dade resident, but if you have an expanded practice that includes video and art or installation work, you can be from around the country. Third Horizon is an organization that I'm involved with as well. There's a tie to the Caribbean diaspora, but they're an incredible organization based out of Miami as well. But I want to echo again how amazing New Orleans Film Society is, the film festival. They've been an incredible supporter of my work over the years. And but I really, really, really want to implore to not wait for an institution to grant you permission to do work. I think that a lot of us really put this block in front of us of, I just need one more grant, or I just need one more person to say yes. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Queerness has always been about disruption. It's been about finding new ways of new modes of production. And I think that filmmaking in general is super resource intensive. It runs on an economic model that either requires a lot of money or free labor. And it's like, think of other ways of doing it. I'm prepping a film right now, a feature film, and I sit down with my producers and we're always constantly thinking of ways of, do we really need that? Do we really need this person or that person? And finding ways of working that's different. There's no rules. And I think modeling yourself after the sort of like industry Hollywood model is just setting up more roadblocks for your work.
Absolutely. Thank you. There was a bunch there to absorb. Thank you, Greko, for that. Zuri, I think I'm going to pass it to you. And I think there's
Yeah, sure. Before we move through, I would be remiss to not mention House of Tulip. I know it's not film specific, but it is a safe house for trans folks, ran by trans folks, by trans folks. And they're just an amazing, wonderful, loving group of people that not only provides emergency housing, they provide some support around getting your name changed, really understanding your rights, and getting your dead name changed into your real name, your actual name. So I'm going to put the House of Tulip link here. If you can donate to them, please do, because they're just, oh my God, amazing group of folks. But with that, we're going to move into our Q&A session for the remainder of the talk. We have one question, and it's for anyone who wants to answer. I'll ask the question and I'll put it into context. So I have one that says, I'm really weary of how since this morning's cutoff, race has been sidestepped or completely silenced and visible. I'm curious about how y'all see the intersection of Blackness and queerness in this nearly 60% Black city with this colonial history steeped in venturing into darkness and African. So just to give a little context, earlier we had a bomber on our keynotes talk. And there was a lot of just sexist and racist things that were being yelled out, and we had to cut it off. So a lot of folks were affected from that. And I think you so much, I forgot who sent this, but thank you so much for helping us slow down and to really situate ourselves, address that harm that might have happened. But yeah, this person really wants to know, how do y'all see the intersection of Blackness and queerness actualizing itself in this city or whatever city? I know, Greko, you're in Miami. If you feel like you can speak to that.
Sure. I mean, I don't feel super equipped to answer because I'm missing a little bit of context of what happened earlier, but I mean, I think it's along those lines of the South having a really problematic history, right? And it's sort of never going away, as much as certain politicians want to pretend like it has. And the South or America isn't a racist country. I think it's just like all of ignoring what we're experiencing and seeing every day. So I think just like every other issue is like not ignoring it. I think ignoring it just gives it power. So always speaking on it, or always opening up dialogue about it. And always, I think organizations and institutions really do need to address that, right? Like to do sort of the work to kind of ask themselves the hard question of like, who are we supporting? Who are we choosing to elevate? And I mean, I think that's the only way forward, right?
I think I'm guessing just from the context of the question, again, I just from you, Zuri, heard about any event that was happening earlier that I didn't know about until now. But I would say that even in, I mean, regardless of what city it is, whether it is New Orleans, really down in the bottom tip of the South, where a lot of the problematic history not just existed, but prevails in so many different corners down here. I think what is really important, I think, to me, from a position where I sit as a white filmmaker, is that there is no complete story in any way, shape, or form in the queer experience here in the South that is not very, very heavily involving or needing to involve in the storytelling itself, the Black experience of that story point. So in the case of the Phoenix film, I know that was like a 20-second clip from it. It's a 15-minute film. Just something that was such a crucial part of their story. The bar's history story was that they were the first gay male bar, I'll be more specific there, that were very actively hiring Black bartenders in the early 80s, and not just hiring them to bartend, but hiring them to really serve as like a board of the very young business. And then just the pride that they held about that. That's not a story that you hear just walking into that bar. That's a story you hear from talking to the people who've been there forever, talking to the bartenders who've been there since the beginning of time. I think it's really important to highlight the successes, the advancements that have been made in relations of all forms, while highlighting where the major problems lie as well, because I think both coexist in these stories. And I don't know, there's nothing but just major work to be done. And I will just reiterate, no story is complete in the South, in the queer experience, without that front and center.
Yeah, I think I would just add that I think questions like this are super important, and that we should all be having conversations about like the reality of how segregated the queer communities in New Orleans are. And it is just a reality that, like, even going out in New Orleans, you have like the white queer spaces and then everyone else. And that's just a real thing. And it doesn't, it doesn't like necessarily, it doesn't, I think it doesn't come from, it comes from the same, it doesn't come from an intentionality of segregation, but I think it often comes from a lack of intentionality around existing in a city with this history that is completely and totally inseparable from these legacies of violence and resistance and building. And I think that there is conversations that are not happening a lot of the time that we're seeing. But I also think, yeah, and that is also to say that like, as I'm not Black and also not from New Orleans, and a lot of my community is very mixed in that regard. And I think that what the conversations that we are having often is like, what does it mean to own experiences where we are not particularly welcomed or at home in another space, and that because of these sanctuaries that have been created and because of who we've been invited by and welcomed by, have found home in spaces like New Orleans. I think we're always having conversations about like, before you are building your own space, you are listening to the people who have been building for years and years, and finding like where it is that you are invited and where it is that you are not, and having like really honest conversations with ourselves about why we're here, and what is hurt and what is harm and what is help and what is for us and what is not. And so I think these are just conversations that never end. And but so yeah, I think I just want to honor and like hear that these are just, especially in my experience in queer spaces, it's very segregated, and I see and hear constantly that it's very easy to be from the city and to go to a place and not feel welcome. And I do think that in the creative, like there's so much that we can do in these creative processes and working together to try and open those spaces, as long as these kinds of conversations are happening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya, for that insight. And I think Palmer's question really kind of helped us break open this definition of Southern queer sanctuaries, right? Not every sanctuary is the same, and some sanctuaries are born out of being pushed out of other sanctuaries, especially when it comes to Blackness and other just like, you know, class and disability, depending on how you show up in the world, sanctuary looks different. And, you know, I would have been interested to kind of get into the question about what pushes someone to build their own sanctuary, but I feel like we're kind of out of time. But that's something we can kind of be left with this idea of like, what pushes you, like not only the panelists, but those who are tuning in, like what pushes you to build and seek your own sanctuary, right? And what does that foundation looks like, especially when it comes to race and like other things that aren't conventionally accepted into the mainstream. So yeah, thank you so much for your words, Vaughn, Greko, and Maya. Yeah, I feel like this is the last question that I have is, where can folks get in touch with you, follow your work and support the work that you do, or support the organizations that you support? You can either drop it in the chat or you can speak it. But yeah, I kind of want to part with that of like, how do we stay connected? How do we keep this conversation going, especially if we want to speak to a specific person on the panel?
I guess I'll go. Yeah, you can just you can go to my website, grekotv.com. I have a very long last name, so I made that easy for everyone.
Thank you.
You'll find links to my Instagram, my email. Please feel free to reach out. Find me on the socials. Thank you.
Yeah, just dropping your website there. Cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say follow us on the gram, Farrington Flex. I also just say that to the speakers as well. It's been like a great chat. As well as just check out outonfilm.org, which is our Atlanta-based queer-focused organization. We're doing a Kickstarter next week. We're raising $10,000 to put more capital in completion fund projects and accessing resources to to filmmakers for the next month, and it's going to go on until June. But yeah, we are a fall festival, so we're coming up, so save the date. That's going to be October 1st to September 2nd. I invite all the filmmakers to submit their films and anything that you might have in the circuit there, as well as anyone in the audience who just might want to get some more information. We have national screenings virtually, so you don't have to be in Georgia to attend and enjoy our festival. We try to make it as accessible for all our folks in the South, especially.
Perfect. Yeah. And if you haven't gotten a chance, if you're a panelist or someone who's just tuning in and you want to stay in touch, please drop your information in the chat so that we can build this network, build this sanctuary. So yeah, thank you, Farrington, for leading this conversation. Maya, Vaughn, Greko, for sharing your thoughts, your work, and just the personal sense of your sanctuary with us. I can't thank you enough for just the work that you do and how you show up in the world, and building sanctuary in a time when we're needed more than ever. So thank you for that.